Hey everyone, you're having sorts with James, and today I'm going to show you how to build this hardwood studio desk for under $500 Australian. Also, if you're just interested in building a normal student desk, I'm going to take you through how to build that, and I'm going to add the rack on it. I'm going to add the keyboard drawer on as we go. So if you just want to check out a desk, watch along, but if you do want to build the full studio rack, watch to the end. Let's go. Okay, so we're going to build a studio desk. I want to show you some of the materials that we're going to be using, and the reason I'm building my own studio desk is I found it really hard to find one that I actually liked. The cheaper ones that were sort of up to $1,000, I didn't like the design and I didn't like the materials they're made out of. And then if you look at anything that's made out of hardwood or something really nice, we're talking upwards of $2,000, $3,000 for a desk. We can 100% make that cheaper. What I'm going to do to make this desk is we're going to make it out of a treated pine construction with a plywood top, and we're going to totally veneer it in Tasmanian oak timber found in Australia, or any hardwood really. And the whole thing's going to look solid, it's going to look chunky, and it's going to look like it's made out of hardwood timber complete through and through. So that's what we're going for. Tools that you will require for this, look, I'm lucky enough to have a table saw and a miter saw and a shop full of tools, so that will definitely help. But as a bare minimum on this one, you'd need a circular saw, clamps, drills, glue, that type of stuff. So, you know, if you have got the tools and you want to give it a bit of a go yourself, totally you could save some money here, and I'm sure you could get a pretty good result. Now, I am making a studio desk today, so that's going to have a rack set up on top for all my guitar rack gear. But if you just want to make the computer desk or a student desk, all you would need to do is omit the bit of a rack unit that we're going to build on top of the desk. So follow along, this will be good for you as well. Having a look at a bit of the stuff that we've got here to build it with, as I said, we're going to use treated pine timber. I've bought structural pine to do the legs and the base with, and I picked that up for around 150 Australian dollars for the amount that we're going to need. It ended up being about 18 metres. For the tabletop, we're using a 32mm plyboard. I actually got this really cheap at one of those timber clearance yards. I got a 2.4 metre by 600mm piece of plywood for $50, so you can't go wrong there, right? I've got some battens here as well. These battens I picked up from a clearing yard, $7 each. Now these are Jarrah and spotted gum, so that's what we're going to do some of our edging with. Super cheap to buy them that way, but you go outside of a hardware store and you go to some of these clearing yards, you can get a bargain. And then what we're going to clad it with is 14mm lining boards. Now this is a much cheaper way of purchasing hardwood, especially if you buy it from a wholesaler or you buy it again from one of those clearing yards, reclaimed or whatever it might be. It's miles cheaper, and I ended up picking that up for about $6 a metre, which is you know, pretty damn cheap. So all up in it for timber, I'm up for around $400, and when you consider, you know, a solid hardwood desk is going to set me back a couple of $1,000, I'm in it for $400 at the moment, so pretty good going. So let's start off with making the tabletop. I'll talk you through step by step. So let's follow along. Okay, so here is our plywood bench top that we're going to use. Now, as I said, pick this up for a steal, $50. And we've got our Tassie oak hardwood lining boards. Now, all I'm going to do with these is I'm just going to sort of map out, you know, how I want to build my desk. Now, the plywood's 30 mils thick, and these lining boards are 14 mil thick. So at the end of the day, I'm going to end up with a 44 mil thick bench top, which is pretty chunky. And if I was to pick one of them up in my local hardware store, or you know, your Home Depots, your Bunnings, etc., I've seen hardwood boards, Australian dollars, worth $600–700. You know, when you consider that this is going to be made for probably 150, we're already off to a flying start. So what we want to do is just sort of lay them out and work out what we're looking at. Now I want a 600 wide desk, and I get 105 mil out of each board. So creates one problem. I'm going to end up with a bit of a sliver. So what I'm going to do here to start this off is I'm actually going to measure my board, so I've got an even cut for board 1, and I'm going to have 6 boards. I need an even cut for N6. All right, so I have 2 skinnier boards and then the 4 fatter boards in the middle. So that's how I'm going to lay it out. The other thing you want to work out is how long you want your desk. Now, I'm building it to my specs. You can build this however you want. You can have a great big long thing, you can have a short, small, compact one, whatever fits your space. This is going to be 1.8 meters long. So I need to cut down these and I'll need to cut down these. I'm going to cut all this to 1.8 and get my sliver cuts done using the table saw for this top. and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to fix these to the plyboard. All right, a great way to cut your plywood or your tabletop is just with one of these rafter squares or a speed square and your circular saw as a guide. I've marked this off where I want it to be, and we just make our cut. Measuring out my lining boards for the tabletop and how to cut these. So you'll notice here that I have clamped my boards together. Now these, you might have noticed, were tongue and groove style lining boards, basically just meaning that they've got a tongue that clips into one end of the other one with the groove. So they push together all nice and give you this nice snap locked finish, which is really cool. But I know that I want a 600 wide table. So basically I'm just going to take my tape measure and measure across. And here I've got 655 mil, so I know I've got to take 55 mil off to make sure that this is 600 wide. Now, as I said, I don't want one little slither board, so what I'm going to do here is take off 2.75 on this side, so that's 27.5 mil, and 27.5 mil off this side, and that'll give me my nice even tabletop with the even boards in the middle. Other way you could do this, you could do a slither board in the middle if you wanted to, and have full boards go to the edge. It's totally up to you how you do this. This is just how I'm doing it. So let's run these through the table saw. Well, all right, I've got the table saw dialed in to make the couple of cuts that we need to make. Now, this is where I said you could do it with a circular saw, but it'd be a lot more challenging. The table saw certainly makes it a lot easier. So if you have got the tools, fantastic. If not, yeah, you got a long straight line to cut with that circular saw. And there you go, and you'll notice that I've got it clamped together. I've got it clamped up with a couple of pipe clamps. These are a really handy thing to have in your toolkit. You can see there that we're spot on the money, and we've got our two boards, board 1, board 6 if you like, that are cut a little bit thinner, and it's looking nice and neat. Now don't worry about a few little gaps in the middle at this stage. It's pulled together pretty well. We're not going to be too worried about that. We are going to sand the whole top back and make it nice and dead flat. And also, if you do get a little bit of overhang either side, don't stress too much. We're going to sand and clean that up, and we're going to do some trim around the outside. So don't worry about that too much. What we do need to focus on is just cutting all these boards now to size. Now you want a nice clean edge at the edge, so I'm going to make sure that I clean up both ends to get my 1.8 meters. So I've got nice, clean, square ends to put our trim onto a bit later. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back and look at fastening the boards to the ply. All right, we've got our hardwood lining boards fastened to our plywood. Now what I've used with that, Titebond 2, really good glue, super strong, dries quick, good glue. And I've used some 30mm brad nails as well, just to secure it in position. Now the lining boards do expand and contract, albeit very minutely. People will tell you probably not to do it. I'm not worried about it, to be honest. It won't go anywhere. And with the way that I do the edging, it will allow for a little bit of movement, so there'll be no problem there with it at all. But that's how we've fastened it down. Now, you might notice lots of clamps. Clamps are your friend in this space. If you haven't got them, you can probably put weight down on top of it to make sure it really is, secured down while the glue dries. But I'm going to leave this overnight. So we'll come back tomorrow and let's finish this top off. Well, okay, we've given our tabletop just overnight to dry. It was getting a bit late in the day anyway, so we've let that dry nicely. Really happy with it. Now we want to look at the bindings that we're going to put on the outside. Now I have chosen the Jarrah. The Jarrah has one out. So what we've got to do here is basically knock 45s up at the corner. Now these are a little bit higher than the bench top. There's a couple of ways I could do this. I could always just sink them and have them a little bit below the bench top, which would be totally fine. But I've got the table saw, so I'm going to knock them down. I'm going to end up with something like this. You can see I've cut it at a 45 and I've just taken a whisker off. Don't worry about the few burn marks from the saw. They're going to come off when we sand the top. but we're going to end up with this sort of fashion, so you can see the contrast. All right, and what we're going to do from there is, I'm not going to, with the fixings I use, I'm going to glue it and screw it, but I'm actually going to use the fixings as a bit of a feature. Now I've got these black wafer head screws, and I've got a Forstner bit that I'll use in my drill. Now what I'll do here is I'll just countersink these, and the head will sit nice and flush in the binding, and it should look really nice with the black, you know, evenly spaced all around the tabletop. So let's get to it. So I'll give you a bit of a look at how we're fastening this strip. Now I've used my Forstner bit. I've measured out nice even spaces. I'm doing it at about 28 centimeters apart. But I've used my Forstner bit here, and I've gone in just deep enough. I've just got one of my wafer head screws, and I'm going across, just making sure that I'm nice and flush. And you see that there, you can see that I'm sitting nice and flush. Now the other thing you always want to do with hardwood is pre-drill. All right, if you don't pre-drill, you can put huge cracks through it. It'll be no good. So everything hardwood needs to be pre-drilled. And how you want to do that is pick the drill bit, and if you can see the thread past the drill piece bit like that, you're golden. If you go too small, you're likely to crack it. If you go too big, obviously you're not going to get that fastening strength that you need. So little tip there. Well, all right, we've made some great progress, and now we're up to sanding the top of our tabletop. And what I'm going to do for that, I'm going to use my orbital sander here. I'm going to use 120 grit first, and then I'm going to step it down and do a 220, get it nice and fine. I am, however, going to keep the dust extraction off for the first bit. The reason for that is I'm going to put a little bit of glue in some of the gaps that I've got, particularly in the lining boards. They've got a couple of grooves in them from when they've been machined in the process of making them. I'm going to put a little bit of the glue, the tight bond, in there that we've used. And if I keep the vacuum off as I sand across, the sawdust will just fill up those little gaps nicely and give me one nice uniform surface. So we're going to do that. So let's hook into the sanding. This should take a little bit because we want to get it really, really nice. And then we're going to move on to the legs. So let's go do some sanding. All right, beautiful. Now that we've got this nice and smooth, just one last thing we need to do, and then we're going to put this aside. I've got a really sharp edge here now, and I'm just going to run my router. I'm just going to put a round over piece in the router, and I'm just going to buzz it around. If you haven't got a router, you could just run a piece of sandpaper over the edge just to take the point off, but the router will give us a nice even finish. Well, okay, we're done with the tabletop for now. We've put that aside, and we're going to move on to the legs. Now what you'll see here is a finished leg. I've knocked this one up so you can get a bit of an idea of what we're going to do here. This studio desk I'm going to stick up with just 2 legs. They're nice and chunky though, so we'll definitely hold up the tabletop in any weight you're going to put on it. And what I've done with these is I've used that treated pine 90 by 45s that we got earlier, and I've clad it in the same fashion as we did for the tabletop. I've clad it with the hardwood lining boards, and this is the end result, which looks pretty neat. They're nice and chunky, and that's what we want. We want that sort of look. A couple of considerations when you are making the legs. If you remember back, the tabletop is 600 wide. You do not want your legs to be wider than the table. It'll look silly, and people are going to likely trip over it. So I've got these ones here dialed in at about 55 centimeters or 550 mil, and then at the top, I'm working with about 260 mil, which is going to be plenty enough for our tabletop to sit on. And the angles that I've chosen to cut this on are at 10 degrees, which I'm going to show you on the miter saw how I do that. Sticking with 10 degrees just made it super easy. And you know, I kind of like the incline that the leg's on, rather than having it too sharp or, you know, straight up and down, being that we're only going to use the 2 legs. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is how high you want to build your legs. These ended up being 780 mil from the bottom right up to the top there. That's going to give us enough height to get an office chair under comfortably, and for me to put a keyboard drawer under the desk that can pull out. If you're not going to use the keyboard drawer, you probably could drop the desk, you know, probably 50 mil would be totally fine. But we're going to keep them a little bit high so we can get that in. But without further ado, let's just go get to building one. Let's go over to the saw. So we're over at my miter saw now, and I mentioned that I'm going to cut all the angles at 10 degrees. Now, the way I'm going to go about doing that is, if you see on my miter saw here, I've got all these markings along the side. And as long I can move that across to 10 degrees that way to do a cut, I can also move it 10 degrees back to this way to do a cut. So that's how I get my angle. It's easy peasy. I'll get back to center. And all I'm going to do with my treated pine, which I've got like so, is for each one of these cuts, I'm just lining it up and then I'm running my angles at 10 degrees, and away I go, I'll make my cut. So let's get the cutting, and I'll show you how we're going to construct these legs. Okay, we've made our cuts for our leg frame, and I will give you the measurements that I've done to make these legs, and I'll give them to you from when I've straight cut them. So all these were cut straight, and then I docked 10 degrees off, if that makes sense. If you do want to copy the table pretty much exact, I'll give you these measurements so you can do so. So I started off with 425 millimeters for this bottom piece, and don't worry if you haven't found the metric system yet, I will share how much it is in imperial on the screen. So I started off with that, we've docked it to 10 degrees, we've got like so. For the top one, it was cut at 160 millimeters straight, and then we docked it at 10 degrees, and obviously the angles alternate to one another. And each of my side pieces that make the height of the legs were cut at 800 millimeters straight, then with 10 degrees taken off. Now, you might note on this leg, and this leg only, I've got a special groove cut. Now, I did this with what's called a dado stack in my table saw. And this is where we're going to do our cable management. So because we're going to have a computer and we're going to have some guitar rack gear, what I don't want is cables all hanging off the back of the desk. So what we're going to do is run them through the tabletop and down, hidden inside a leg. So I've done this with the table saw on a dado stack, and you can see that going now. You don't need all this equipment to do that. You could quite easily buzz this through with a circular saw and just make a series of cuts. I've got some equipment that makes it a bit easier than that, so hence why I've used it. So that's my dado cut. That is our cable management system that's going to run down the leg like so. Now we're going to fix it together. Now all we're going to fix it together with are treated pine screws. So these are the screws. They're 75 millimeter and they're a square head drive. I really like these. They're a coated screw that can go into treated pine and they won't break down on you. They bite into this stuff and go through very, very easily. So I'm also going to glue with the tight bond glue that you've seen me using. I'm going to glue each joint and I'm going to screw it for some extra stability. So let's stick this one together now. So give a bit of a look at how we're joining these together. So what you want to do is make sure you get glue on your joint. So because it's end grain, it will soak a bit of glue up. So don't be afraid to put a bit on there. Be pretty generous. So we've got the glue on. I've got one of these little glue spreaders. So we're just going to spread the glue out nice and even, like so. All right, that'll be heaps. We'll put that aside. All right, now a little trick with this to make sure you get really nice, solid, perfect joints is we're on a table here, and I'm lining it up with the edge of the table. All right, so I know that it's going to be nice and straight. You can see I'm lined up down the table, and these clamps are your friend. They're called F clamps. These ones, they're readily available. But I'm actually going to clamp this straight up to the bench. All right, so feel there, I've got absolutely no lippage, if you like. I'm nice and flat. And now that I'm clamped to the bench, when I screw it in, it's not going to go anywhere. So it makes the job super easy, and I know we're going to be nice and flat. So when we screw these in too, I've actually driven that in quite a ways. That's okay. We actually need them to be below, because when we clad it, we don't want screw heads hanging up. And there we go. There's our carcass completed for our other leg. Now, 8 screws and a bit of glue later. Really, really easy construction. Like I said, those clamps make the job a lot easier. You can see there that we've got our cable management system on one side, on the outside of the leg, which is what we want. So this will be the back, facing away from you when you sit down on the leg, so you won't see any of the cords. Now we've got to veneer it essentially, and what we're using our humble tongue and groove lining board. All right, we've got heaps of these offcuts left over. And all I've done with these is I've cut strips. And I did this with the table saw. Again, you could use your circular saw, a little bit more work, but the table saw makes life really easy. And all I do for that is just take the measurement that you want in the table saw for the 90 by 45, so the 45 mil that I'm using here. I've made that how wide I need to cut my strips for the inside, and then I can clad to the outside. I'll get my outside measurement once I've done that. Well, okay, I've done up my first side for my hardwood veneer out of the lining boards, and same principle as we did with the treated pine, just cut at the 10-degree angle, and I've just basically measured out the same length as the treated pine underneath, and that's given us this. Now what we're going to fasten those down with, we're going to use some of our Type Bond Type 2 glue that we've been using. We're just going to do like a run down each one, and we're going to use some brad nails. Now these are 25 mil brad nails, which are going to do the trick, and these are only an 18 gauge, so they're a small nail, but that's all we need to fasten this in place. The glue's doing all the work anyway, so we just stick these on down. So we're carrying on with our veneer work, and now we need to do the fascia bit, so the bits are on the front of the legs. Now we can't do those with a 10-degree angle on the side. We need to get a cut that's going to give us like that. Now the way we do that is we're actually tilting the saw over 10 degrees. So you can see that I'm on the 10-degree mark there, and that whole saw blade is now cutting at a 10-degree angle and giving us these nice finishes like this. Let's jump over and I'll show you what I mean on the leg that we're building. So you can see here we're covering the inside of the leg, and with those angles that we've cut, so you can see the 10-degree angle at either end, we're going to fit in just nice into here, like so. And that's all there is to it. We stick to 10 degrees, we're laughing. Well, all right, we're on the home stretch now with this leg. We've got it fully veneered, and now we've just got to fill in the nail heads. And what we're going to use for that is some of this stuff here. It's called Timbermate Wood Filler. It's a really good one, this one. It matches the Tassie Oak up really nice. The other thing that I was going to show you is just how we hide the cable management in the back. So I'll spin it around. Now what I've done here, is, as you can see, is I've got this panel and it's removable. All right, and this is just done with a friction fit. All right, so I've cut this so close to that it actually grabs it. Now, if you didn't get it quite perfect, you could probably use a magnet or something in the back of it to make it stick, but this fits nice and tight. And what I've done when I put it in is I have left a little gap at the top and a little gap at the bottom, and that's just for the power leads to come out the bottom and plug into the wall, and the power lead that's going to run out and go up and through our tables. So really happy with this. Let's sand it. Let's get the timber wood filler in, and we're going to sand down. All right, it's all nice and sanded smooth. Now the edges are really sharp on these legs now, so what I'm going to do is I've just got my round over bit in my router. I'm just going to route over the edges and give us a nice rounded edge, just so it's not so sharp. Right, so we're up to attaching the legs to the tabletop. Now, I've flipped the table up, as you can see, and we're good to go here. Now, where to put the legs? Look, to be honest, I've just used, sort of eyeballed it and what's going to look good, and this is what I've come up with. And to make sure that I'm nice and level all the way around, I've pretty much just measured from here to here and got the same amount for each leg. And then I've just used my rafter square to make sure that I'm nice and square, and I've traced around my legs. So that'll give me exactly where I need to be. And then there's how we're going to fasten the legs down to the tabletop. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these bugle screws. All right, I'm going to use 4 per leg, and I'm going to use my trusty Forstner bit, and I'm going to countersink these. So, I mean, it's under a table, not that you're going to see it, but I'm going to sink these in a bit. Now I'm aiming, I know that the tabletop's all up now is about 45 mil. I'm aiming to go into the tabletop about 30 mil. So that's how deep I'm going to bore into with my forcing a bit, but you'll see that in action. Now the other thing that I need to do here, and I've marked the dot. Now you only need to do this if you're going to do the cable management on the back of the leg. If you're not, just build the legs to the same and play on, you're almost done. But because I'm going to do the cable management, what I'm going to do is I've marked a hole here and I'm going to drill that through with my hole dozer hole bit. And that's so I can pass the cord through from the top of the bench and run it down the leg. So I've marked here, I'm going to drill through from this side and then I'm going to drill back up through that side, route it up, clean it up. So skip that step if you're not going to do the cable management, but if you are, don't forget to do that. All right, let's get these legs on. Okay, so fingers crossed this works. I've drilled up through from the bottom, so I've got where my hole's going to be. And just remember, I mean, you can see it's in the middle of the desk here. Well, not in the middle, but sitting in one of the middle boards. I'm building a rack that's going to sit over the top of this, so you're never going to see where it's coming up and through. But I've put some tape on here, and what that's going to do, hopefully, is minimise any tear out I get. And tear out's just all these little flaky bits that you get when you rip through. Because I'm going in with, a hole saw, I'm going to hold my tongue the right way and hopefully we don't get too much tear out. All right, let's see how we did. Not too bad at all. Happy with that. We'll route it up and clean it up. Well, all right, our desk is now upright. Look, if you were just building this for a student desk, something to do your homework at or whatever, put a slap of coat of oil on this and you're done, so play on. If you do want to continue to build the studio desk, follow along. We're now going to build the rack housings. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to use the same 30mm offcuts of the ply top that we use to do the actual tabletop. A few bits that I've got left we're going to use to do these rack walls. And we're going to clad the exterior ones, so these two. We're going to do the same principle as we did for the tabletop. We're going to cover that in those hardwood lining boards, and we're going to cover the fronts of these with the jarrah edging that we use in the tabletop as well, so it'll really look nice and in sync. The top, we've got a piece of hardwood to go across there as well, so from all accounts the whole desk is going to look like it's made out of hardwood. Now what are the racks, you may ask? They are for studio equipment, and I'll show you. I've got one wrapped up in Glad Wrap just to keep sawdust off. But these are rack units you can put in, effects boards or power conditioners or tuners or whatever you may like into these desks. Now, these need to be 485mm apart or 19 inches. And how do we put that rack equipment in? We put in what's called rack rails. You might also hear these called rack ears or server rails. These basically go in and then we can put our equipment in and away we go. So it should look nice and neat. Now, a couple other things that we need to consider here is how deep we want this to be. Now, most equipment won't exceed 30 centimetres deep. So that's what I've made these to. All the equipment that I've got sort of falls short of that. So I'm going to have plenty of space to do that. So that's how deep we're going to be. And the other thing is how much equipment that you've got. Now, I'm going to have 3 bays here, which is going to allow me with these 4 rack space units to put 12 racks in. Now, I'm only actually going to rack this one and this one, so bays 1 and 3. And I'm going to leave the middle one just open for now, but I'm going to make it to the right specifications. So if down the track I want to add the extra rack space, I can end up essentially having 12 racks of space in my desk, which is probably more than I'll ever need. But for now, I'm just going to keep this blank and store some other stuff in it. So let's jump straight into this rack unit build. It's going to be pretty simple, very much the same principle as we did for the tabletop, and it shouldn't take too long at all. Let's get into it. And there you have it, that's the rack storage complete. Look, I didn't film a lot of this based on the fact that it's very similar to doing the tabletop. You can see I've clad the jarrah. I've used the same method that we used to countersink the screw heads and use the black screws. They were obviously all glued as well. And The only thing that is different here is the tabletop that I used for that. Now, this was called a utility board. So it was basically just a piece of hardwood timber that you can use for anything. You have tabletops or, you know, a shelf, whatever you like. So I actually got it on a really good price. So I decided I'd use that for the top piece. So that's the rack complete. I've screwed it down to the tabletop using the exact same method that we screwed the legs onto the table with. Just blasted up through from the bottom of the tabletop into the rack unit. So we're all good to go. The other thing you might have noticed is that I've given it one coat of oil. Now, I'm using a product called Osmo on this, and I'll give you a bit of a look at what this product is, but this is a hard wax oil. It's the best product I've ever come across. It really preserves the natural look of the timber, doesn't alter it in any way, and it becomes food grade, spill resistant, all that type of stuff. So I swear by this stuff. Give it a shot. The only call out I would say is don't buy it in a 4 litre tin. I've got it in a big tin, only because I did a big job in my house. The stuff does skin pretty badly. It dries out and goes horrible. So once you sort of open it, I think you've got about 2 months to use it, or it doesn't seem to last very long. So that would be my only call out when using this product, but definitely gives you a good finish. This has had one coat. You put it on really thin, but I will give it a second coat once we've got this keyboard drawer on, which we're going to move on to next. So let's go. Well, all right, if you made it this far, we're on to building our keyboard drawer. Well, in my case, it's going to be for my guitar pedals. Now, what we're working with here, this is the offcut from the utility board that I made the top of the rack unit with. This is what was left. It's about 800 millimeters, so not too bad. It's going to fit my needs. This is some 19 by 42 that I had lying around, Tas oak. I've pretty much just knocked a frame up. It's cut the same width, the dimensions as this. So just essentially make a bit of a tray. You see that standing up like so. So there we are. Then I have these drawer runners. Now I bought 45 kilo rated drawer runners, and I bought soft close runners. You don't want those push to open ones. You want to be able to just pull your drawer open. You don't want to have to push it in unless that's what you're after. And they're soft close, so they won't go slamming back into the table. So we've got 2 of those, 45 kilo rated. They're essentially going to be bolted up to the side of our tray like so. Now that gives us our tray, and what we need for this is a bit of a carcass to bolt to the desk. So we've got our keyboard drawer that's going to basically attach to it. And pretty simple for that. I've got here some 110 again by 19mm hardwood, and we're just going to build that on the bench. We're going to go butt up to our hinges and like so. Now whatever size you make it, you know, if you copy in this design, like that's pretty simple, right? That's just going to, if you picture this just bolting up to the bottom of the desk, and this should just slide in and slide out beautiful, and it'll be really easy. So we're going to stick that together with, again, our tight bond 2 and our brad nailer with some clamps. That's going to be our method. We're not going to change that now. And I've also got this little bit of an offcut of Jarrah from doing the corners of those desks. And we're just going to put that on the front just to make it all match and look really nice and neat. So I'm going to go ahead and glue and nail this together. So just one thing with the Jarrah strip that we've glued on the front here. I'm going to glue only, and I've got 3 clamps, one either end and one in the middle. I'm just going to glue this because it is quite a thin strip, and I don't actually have any wood filler that's going to match the Jarrah to use nails. So a bit of patience. I'll let the glue dry. It's not going to go anywhere. And the big black button head screws that we've been putting in the rest of the work, with that so thin, I'm not going to try and risk putting those in. So I think this looks nice and neat. So we're just going to run without, so we'll just wait for that to dry. So I'll just give you a bit of a look at putting one of these drawer runners on. So really easy this. Now these drawer runners are 45mm, and the timber strips that I've used are 45mm as well. So I got pretty lucky there to make it nice and straight. Now what we're using to put these in, the drawer runners come with these tiny little screws. Now being hardwood, we must pre-drill, all right? So I've got that tagged in there. I've set this back about 30 mil. I'm doing that on both sides, and I clamp it at one end. And what that'll do is make sure that I'm nice and straight and I'm in line with this timber here. Because what you don't want is your drawer runners to be off center from each other, and your drawer just won't slide out nice and beautifully. So that's what we're going to do. As I said, we'll pre-drill. There's plenty of areas you can drill. You can drill into here. I'm just going to pick the ones that gives me a little bit of up and down movement, a little side by side movement just in case, but I'm not going to need it. And there we go. It is that easy. Well, all right, our keyboard drawer is nearly ready to go. We've got our slides attached, as you can see, and I've still got the actual part that's going to attach to the carrier still clicked onto as well. These do come off. There is a little black tab that you just push up and they'll slide off. Now we need to build the carrier. So what we're going to use here is, I'm going to leave these hanging. If you can picture this hanging from the bottom of the desk. This is going to be attached to the bottom of the desk, and this is how much space we're going to have. So depending on whether you're going to put guitar pedals in here, a keyboard, maybe it's just a computer keyboard, you can probably make this a lot less if you like. But because I'm going to be putting guitar pedals in here, and they're about sort of 60 to 70 mil high, I need a little bit of height, and I've built the table high enough that you're not going to bash your knees on the keyboard drawer when it goes in. So how did I come up with the measurements for this? So what you want to do is you don't want to clamp these up too tight. You want to give the hinges a little bit of space and room to breathe, but you don't want it so loose that, again, you know, the drawer's not going to fit in and it's going to be no good at all. So for it to slide really nice, I'm not going to clamp it or anything. I'm just going to hold it there, put a slight bit of pressure, and then I know exactly how big to cut this, and I'm going to tag them in. Now I'm going to mark off exactly where these drawer runners are just with the grey lead, and then I can take the drawer runner off and fix it to these either side, put it all together. Let's go and do that. All right, so I'll give you a bit of a look at what I'm doing here. Just to make it easy, I'm just going to start this this carriage piece right at the end of our drawer slide, so it makes it really nice and easy. And I'm just going to do a grey lead line on it, like so, just at the front and back. All right, we're going to take that down. Now these drawer runners, I'll show you how they come off. So really simple. This will be for all the same drawer slides that you've got in your house, on, you know, your kitchen cupboards or whatever. You slide them across. Now you'll see this black tab. If I push that up, all right, now that comes off. So you can see I've got that completely off now. And this is the piece that I'm going to put the right way around, straight up against where we were, right up against the edge, and I'll follow my grey lead line and I'll screw it in. We'll be right to go. So just one last thing that we need to do here before we can put the keyboard tray onto the desk. You'll see here that I've just added some more 19 by 45 mil bits. Now all I've done, same principle, glue and brad nailed these on, and then I'm going to put some screws, drive them up through into the bottom of our desk, and we should be good to go. Okay, so I've just got the table turned over here while we connect our keyboard tray to the table. Now all I've done for this, I've got my F clamps, and I've tried to get this top edge that you can see here sitting just level with the inside of the jarrah that we edge the table with, to give it nice, sort of nice look, sits back a little bit with where you want it. And then each side I just measured in the same amount from each leg, which just happened to be 90 mil in this case. And I'm just going to put some screws in and into the tabletop, and we're on the home stretch. there you have it. The studio desk build is complete. And I'm sure you'll agree, it has really come up $1 million. And to think that it sort of only cost $500, where buying a piece of furniture like this might cost, you know, $3,000 or $4,000, we've saved a lot of money, and you get that satisfaction of having built it yourself. So how good is that? If you are still watching along, thanks heaps for sticking it out to the end of the video. If you do like this content, please check out my channel. There's plenty of other projects on there. There's some tool reviews, and I'm always happy for a request if you've got something that you'd like to see on the channel as well. But you've been home on the tools with James. I'll see you in the next one.